Hey guys, my name is Matimio, and welcome to another episode of Sunday Mailbox. This is a video series where you, the viewer, can submit your gaming or Battlefield-related questions, and then I will give my humble opinion on them. Now, to get the formalities out of the way real quick, if you would like to submit your own question that could be featured in an upcoming episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below, or by sending me a YouTube message. The first question for today is, do you think that the gunship should be removed from the game? As a tanker, I think it's just annoying that I can't do anything about it, and there is already so many things that the tanker have to avoid and take care of. I honestly don't know how DICE is going to be able to go about balancing out this vehicle. It's clear that they want it in the game. They continue to patch it, they continue to tweak it here and there, and that makes sense because it's one of the tools in the arsenal of the commander, and the commander honestly doesn't really have a whole lot at their arsenal to begin with, and so if they completely removed it, I can see why they would be hesitant to do so. But right now, it just seems like they have such a hard time balancing it out because before the recent update, it was on the weak side. Like, you had to be very persistent to take out enemy infantry down on the ground. You had to be very persistent to take out a tank. But basically, if a jet or an anti-air tank looks in your general direction, there's nothing you can do about it. And so I realize why they increased its effectiveness, because they wanted to make it a more useful tool for the commander. But at the same time, with that recent update, if you're playing on the Naval Strike DLC and you're playing on Carrier Assault, it can be a nightmare for the enemy team. Because on those maps and for that game mode, there aren't jets or an anti-air tank, trying to take out the gunship in the sky feels impossible. I think that there are a couple of ways that you can go about it, but if they're coordinating with the commander and they have a bunch of people up there, because the power has been increased so significantly, you just get pummeled down on the ground. And one of the things about the gunship is you can't hide from it. Like, if you're playing on the Naval Strike DLC, you guys probably know that there isn't a whole lot of hiding spots. Like, especially if you're playing on Lost Island, good luck trying to survive that bombardment because there's just no cover for you. Like, you can try to duck behind maybe a rock, but because they're so high up and they have so much splash damage, you're basically a sitting duck. It sucks to play as an infantry in those scenarios because you literally can't do anything against it. You feel useless, you feel vulnerable, and it sucks when you're playing a video game and that you have that sense of dread and you have that sense of I can't do anything right now. And so I honestly do not know how they'd be able to go about balancing out the gunship. Like, I get the fact that they want to keep it in the game because it's one of the tools in the arsenal of the commander and they need to have at least a couple of tools because that I feel like the commander itself just is not fleshed out. But at the same time, it's just one of those vehicles where it's completely useless or it's like blatantly overpowered on some of these maps, and it just sucks in both cases. And so I personally would not be opposed for them just to completely remove it from the game, but this is something that I would not expect. The next question comes from the Gummy Cave, and it is, what do you think about adding the ability to physically damage the MCOMs in Rush, shooting them with rocket launchers and C4? It would add an ability for the attackers to have a chance even if they are pinned down and can't get to the objective. It would also make the support MPAS useful. So this does sound like a cool idea. I realize that there are a lot of times when you're playing on Rush and it feels like it's almost impossible to push up onto the objective. You're in your base, they're just camping the entire time. And if you have the option to just shoot a bunch of RPGs at that last MCOM that you're trying to get to progress to the next base, that does seem like a very appealing prospect. But if you ever played Bad Company 2, you would know that this was an awful idea, because back in that game, a tactic that was employed all the time was you would have tanks and players sitting basically in their deployment the entire round and just fire rockets and fire their tank shells at the MCOM the entire round until it was slowly whittled down. And what sucked about this is that it happened way too often. Like, if you were on the defensive team, you were doing your job, you were making sure that the enemy wasn't able to push up onto the objectives, you were playing Rush appropriately. You would have these scenarios where it's like, yeah, we should win, but because they were using this tactic and just firing rockets at their deployment all game long, we lose. And I guess some people could say that everyone should just switch in over to the engineer class and try to fire a lot of rockets at that tank, instantaneously taking it out. But if you're playing with a lot of randoms, you know that that's simply not going to happen. Like, maybe once in a blue moon, everyone's going to be able to coordinate and fire an RPG at the same time to instantly take out the vehicle to avoid, the thousands of repair bots behind them. but you're playing at a random pup. Like, that's just simply not gonna work. The other thing that you suggest is C4, and this was another thing that was blatantly abused in Bad Company 2. You would have a bunch of recon players run into the objective, and if no one was around, or they just quickly take everyone out, they would pile on like 10 C4s onto the MCOM, and then detonate it at the same time, and instantly, like literally instantly destroy the MCOM. There's nothing you can do about that, and if players are being sneaky, and you have no idea that they're there, it defeats the purpose of the whole arm defend type of playstyle that Rush is known for. And so while I think that in Battlefield 4 it wouldn't be as bad because you're right, the support class does have access to the MPAS, at the same time, this was something that DICE realized was a problem. A lot of people hated it back in Bad Company 2, and so it's for those very reasons, while I know it can be very frustrating to be on an offensive team where it feels like it's almost impossible to push up onto the objective, this is not the solution that you are looking for. The next question comes from Jade, and it is, as you know, the FPS gaming industry has been gung-ho on modern/futuristic settings the last few years, Battlefield included. I went back and played Battlefield Bad Company 2 Vietnam and COD World at War, and I really wish DICE would revisit those time periods. Do you think that DICE will ever get away from this fad of modern shooters and try to create a game in World War II or Korea War setting? You are absolutely right. Modern first-person shooters are definitely a fad, but you also have to remember that World War games and the Vietnam games were also a fad. Like, that setting was drilled into the ground. Like, if you played a first-person shooter a couple of years ago, you were probably playing in that time period. Like, that's just what they created their games around. And so I have a feeling where things are going to be heading here in the near future isn't backwards. It's possible. They could start making more of those video games. But where I see things heading is more down the futuristic route. We've already seen glimpses of this with the Call of Duty franchise. Battlefield is going a little bit more futuristic. We got the Planet Side 2, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's just really a setting. I don't have too much of a problem with futuristic gameplay or modern gameplay, because as long as the gameplay itself is solid, as long as it's fun and enjoyable, I'm completely content. I think another reason why they've gone down this path is that if you have a modern first-person shooter or a little bit futuristic, it gives you a lot more options for customization and a lot more different ways that you can allow the player to customize their character. If we tried to make Battlefield 4 in the past, and let's say it was in World War II, trying to get the amount of customization options on weapons would be literally impossible. The technology back then just wasn't available. They did not have as many weapons, they didn't have as many optics, they actually probably didn't have nearly as many optics, and so trying to get that same type of customization and trying to sell a game on that idea would be a little harder. And while I don't think it's impossible, I think that gaming developers out there are well equipped with the knowledge and the know-how to make it work, but I think that is probably the main reason why we've seen so many video games in the modern and futuristic setting. The next question is, do you think that there should be a sniper game mode? DICE could set it up so that you have conquest-sized maps with no vehicles and the only weapons available are bolt-action sniper rifles. I know a lot of people love to snipe, myself included, and the only way to really do this is to get on conquest map and snipe at long range, which doesn't help your team. So I'm actually surprised how often I get this question for Sunday Mailbox. I guess I did not realize how many people wanted a sniper-only game mode in Battlefield 4, and admittedly, it sounds kind of cool in concept. Like, the idea of having just a bunch of snipers slowly crawling around the map trying to get the headshot off on the enemy before they're able to get the headshot off on them. Something that you would see in maybe a sniper action movie. It does sound pretty cool in concept, but at the same time, I don't know if this would work in Battlefield 4 because of the current game mechanics, or even if it would be appropriate because it only caters to a very select type of playstyle. And so the first thing that you'd have to work around is if you're having 64 recons on one map with high-powered bolt-action rifles and the higher optics, the map is going to look like a Christmas tree with the amount of sniper glint. Like, you're not going to be able to have the gameplay, which I'm assuming you're looking for, is where you're in a position, you're in your sniper hole, taking shots at enemy snipers. That isn't going to happen because as soon as you stand still, as soon as you don't move, or you go prone, you're going to get sniped by 1,000 different recons from 1,000 different directions because of the sniper glint mechanic. Everyone is going to know exactly where you are. And because of this, the only way that you'd be able to be remotely successful on one of these maps is to be on the move constantly. You would not be able to have that realistic sniper gameplay that you're looking for. You would have to be constantly ducking behind cover, trying to block line of sight, you know, kicking a couple of pot shots, you know, running into a building, and that is literally the only way that you'd be able to be at least remotely successful. And the person that is sitting on top of a tower or sitting on top of a rooftop going prone, they're gonna die almost instantaneously. And so honestly, the first thing that would have to be removed is the sniper glint. Another thing you'd have to look into is that there isn't a lot of foliage on some of these maps. And so if you're looking for that jungle-esque sniper gameplay that I'm assuming you're looking for, where you're hunkered down in a position where you're using the environment to cover you, you're not gonna find that on a lot of the maps in Battlefield 4. And so they'd also have to design, if they did this for a future DLC, I'm assuming it wouldn't be for all maps, but they would literally have to design these maps centered around that concept of having just an absurd amount of foliage that not only renders for you right next to you, but also way out in the distance. Because you guys know that when you aim down sight, the foliage doesn't usually render at those extreme distances. And so pinpointing a sniper who assumes he is in cover, he's in all of these bushes, but as soon as you zoom in, he's clearly not because it just simply doesn't render, that would be a pretty large deterrent for the gameplay that you're looking for. And then the final reason is that I feel like this caters to a small demographic. Like, I'm sure that if the DLC first came out, everyone would try it. They'd try out all the new maps, they'd be like, oh, this is the newest, greatest thing in Battlefield. But after a couple of rounds, they would probably get their fill. They'd probably get tired of getting shot at by 1,000 different sniper rifles from 1,000 different directions. And so I just don't see this the direction that DICE is heading. Because of the foliage not rendering in at long distances, and also if you're playing on PC, if you have different render settings, like if someone is playing on ultra graphics while another player is playing on, let's say, medium or low, you've got a lot more grass that you think you can hide in ultra, but if you're going against someone who's playing in low settings, it's not rendered at all. So as soon as you go prone, you can't see anything in front of you, and you might assume that you're covered because you've got grass all around, but the player that doesn't have those ultra graphics on, they see you absolutely no problem. This is actually a pretty big problem right now with Battlefield 4. And so it's because of those limitations and because of the mechanics that are in place right now, I just don't see DICE going down this path. Maybe they will completely surprise us and this is the next big Battlefield gameplay experience that we're all looking for, but I just don't think that's the case. But yeah, guys, that is about it for today's Sunday Mailbox. I hope you enjoyed. Once again, if you would like to submit your own question that could be featured in an upcoming episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below or by sending me a YouTube message. Until tomorrow, guys, have a good one and take it easy.